Have you ever wondered why some people seem emotionally distant, pulling away just when things get close, or why they rarely reach out first, leaving you to do all the heavy lifting in the relationship? Today, we're diving deep into the psychology of avoidant attachment and uncovering the psychological principles rooted in the work of a legendary depth psychologist that can actually inspire avoidant individuals to step forward, initiate contact, and take the lead. This isn't about manipulation or games. It's about understanding the deep psychological dynamics at play and creating the conditions where connection becomes irresistible. Stay with me, because what you're about to learn might completely transform how you understand love, intimacy, and human behavior. Let's start with something counterintuitive that most people completely misunderstand when dealing with avoidant individuals. The more you pursue an avoidant person, the further they retreat into their protective shell. But why does this happen with such predictable consistency? The answer lies in what depth psychology calls the shadow, those parts of ourselves we reject, deny, or hide from consciousness because they feel too threatening or painful to acknowledge. Avoidant individuals have typically learned early in life, often in childhood, that vulnerability equals danger. Perhaps their emotional needs were consistently dismissed by caregivers. Maybe closeness felt suffocating in their family environment, or dependence was actively punished through criticism or abandonment. So they developed a protective pattern that became hardwired into their nervous system. Independence became their armor, emotional distance became their safety mechanism, and self-reliance became the only trustworthy strategy for survival. Here's the paradox that most people miss entirely. When you chase them with your attention, affection, or demands for connection, you're actually confirming their deepest unconscious belief that people want to consume them, control them, or take away the precious autonomy they've fought so hard to maintain. Your pursuit, no matter how well-intentioned or loving, triggers their shadow fear of engulfment, of being swallowed up by another person's needs and losing themselves in the process. They're not running from you specifically as a person. They're running from what you represent to their unconscious mind, a threat to their carefully constructed fortress of self-protection. But watch what happens when you stop chasing, when you genuinely withdraw your attention and focus on your own wholeness and completeness. Something fascinating and almost magical occurs in the psychological dynamic. The very space you create becomes magnetic rather than repellent. Why does this work? Because you're no longer feeding their shadow narrative about relationships being dangerous or consuming. Instead, you're presenting a mystery, an absence that awakens curiosity in their psyche. The avoidant begins to wonder, sometimes obsessively, why aren't they pursuing anymore? Did I matter less than I thought? What are they doing without me? Have they moved on? This isn't playing games or engaging in manipulative tactics. It's understanding at a profound level that authentic connection requires two complete individuals, not one person desperately chasing while another frantically runs. When you embody your own completeness and demonstrate that your happiness doesn't depend on their inconsistent availability, you stop activating their defense mechanisms and start activating their genuine interest and curiosity. Deep psychology teaches us that we all carry within us an idealized image of what we're unconsciously seeking in another person. And this image operates far below our conscious awareness. This isn't about physical appearance or superficial traits like wealth or status. It's about archetypal qualities that resonate with our deepest psychological needs and wounds. For the avoidant person, this unconscious ideal is very specific and paradoxical. They're unconsciously drawn to someone who embodies autonomy, mystery, and emotional self-sufficiency, because these are the very qualities they've overdeveloped in themselves as protection against the vulnerability they fear. But here's the psychological twist that creates the possibility for change. They're also desperately hungry for what they consciously deny: genuine emotional connection, vulnerability, and intimacy. These rejected needs don't disappear. They go underground into the unconscious, where they create a magnetic pull toward what the psyche knows it needs for wholeness. To make an avoidant initiate contact and take the lead, you must become the living bridge between these two worlds. You must embody both the independence they consciously admire and the emotional depth they secretly crave, but have learned to distrust. This means living a rich, fulfilling life with or without them. In it, you have passions that excite you, purposes that drive you, and people that matter to you beyond this one relationship. You're not waiting by the phone, organizing your entire schedule around their unpredictable availability or hoping they'll finally see your worth. When they observe you thriving independently, pursuing your goals with genuine enthusiasm, and maintaining your own social connections, you match their conscious ideal of what an attractive person looks like. But simultaneously, when you are together in those moments of actual connection, you demonstrate emotional intelligence without neediness or desperation. You can be vulnerable and share your feelings without collapsing into them or making them responsible for your emotional state. You can express emotions without demanding they immediately reciprocate or match your level of disclosure. You show them through your lived example that emotional intimacy doesn't mean losing oneself, doesn't mean becoming dependent or weak. It means finding more of oneself, expanding into greater authenticity and wholeness. When you embody this paradox consistently and authentically, you become irresistible to their unconscious mind. You're showing them a version of connection they've never experienced before, one where they don't have to choose between intimacy, and autonomy, between being close and being themselves. This awakens something dormant in their psyche, and suddenly they want to move toward you rather than away from you. One of the most powerful concepts in depth psychology is individuation, the lifelong process of becoming who we truly are, integrating all parts of ourselves, both the light and the shadow, both the acceptable and the rejected, into a whole, authentic and complete self. This isn't something that happens automatically. It requires conscious effort, self-reflection, and the courage to face what we've been avoiding. Avoidant individuals are stuck in a partial individuation, a halfway point where growth has stopped. They've successfully developed their independence, self-reliance, and emotional control to a high degree. These are genuinely valuable qualities that serve them well in many areas of life. But they've rejected and split off the equally important human needs for connection, vulnerability, and healthy interdependence. They're living half a life, experiencing only a portion of what makes us fully human, even if they don't consciously realize what they're missing or actively deny that it matters to them. Here's where you become transformative rather than just attractive. When you embody integrated wholeness, someone who is both independent and connected, both self-sufficient and relationally engaged, both strong and vulnerable, become a living mirror that reflects their unlived potential back to them. The unconscious mind, according to depth psychology, is powerfully drawn to what it needs for completion, even when the conscious mind resists or denies that need. When an avoidant person encounters someone who has successfully integrated what they've rejected, something awakens deep in their psyche. It's not attraction in the conventional romantic sense of butterflies and infatuation. It's recognition at a soul level. Their psyche recognizes this person has something I need to become whole. This person is living proof that what I've been avoiding is actually possible and perhaps even desirable. This is why avoidants often begin to initiate contact with people who aren't desperately available or waiting around, but who demonstrate healthy emotional integration in their daily lives. You're not just a romantic interest to be pursued or avoided. You're a psychological catalyst, a living example of what wholeness looks like. Your presence, your way of being in the world suggests that maybe, just maybe, connection doesn't mean annihilation of self. Maybe vulnerability doesn't equal weakness or danger. Maybe intimacy could actually enhance rather than diminish their autonomy and sense of self. When you live this integration authentically from a genuine place of having done your own inner work, you don't need to convince them of anything through words or its arguments. Your very existence becomes the invitation to growth and transformation. And because the movement toward wholeness is a fundamental psychological drive that operates even when we're not aware of it, they begin to move toward you. Not out of neediness or desperation, but out of a deep, unconscious pull toward their own completion and the fuller version of themselves. They could become. Here's a profound psychological truth that contradicts much of what popular culture tells us about relationships. People don't truly value what is always available, what is constantly present, what requires no effort to access. This isn't about playing hard to get in some superficial dating game sense where you pretend to be busy or deliberately ignore messages to create artificial scarcity. It's about understanding symbolic absence, the way genuine unavailability creates psychological space where longing, reflection, and genuine desire can emerge organically from within a person rather than being triggered by external pressure. For the avoidant individual, constant presence feels like pressure, like walls closing in, like a demand being made on their emotional resources. It activates their claustrophobia triggers and their deep-seated fears about losing themselves in connection. But strategic absence, not as punishment or manipulation, but as an authentic self-focus and genuine investment in your own life, creates a very different psychological dynamic. When you're genuinely absent, not pretending but actually living your life, pursuing your goals with real enthusiasm, engaged with your own growth and development, several important psychological processes occur in the avoidant person's mind. First, their anxiety decreases significantly. Without the constant pressure of someone wanting more from them, needing more connection, asking for more commitment, their nervous system finally calms down. The stress hormones that kept them in a defensive state begin to subside. The psychological defenses they've erected start to lower because they no longer seem necessary. Second, in that calm, pressure-free space, something unexpected emerges. Curiosity. What are they doing right now? Who are they spending time with? Are they thinking about me at all? Have they forgotten about me? Why haven't they reached out? The human mind, as psychology has demonstrated repeatedly, abhors a vacuum. Your absence creates empty space that their imagination naturally fills, often with scenarios that increase their interest and investment. Third, and most importantly for creating lasting change, they begin to experience what depth psychology calls voluntary desire rather than reactive resistance. When they're being actively pursued, their response is purely reactive, pull away, create distance, protect autonomy, maintain control. It's an automatic defensive response, not a genuine choice. But when you're absent, living your own life, any desire they feel to connect is purely their own. It's not a reaction against someone else's pressure. It's a genuine movement toward connection arising from within their own psyche, from their own authentic wants and needs. This is the crucial moment when avoidants begin to initiate contact, not because you've tricked them or manipulated them into it, but because you've created the psychological conditions where their authentic desire can finally surface without being contaminated by defensive reactivity. They send the first text. They make the plans. They show interest and investment. Why? Because for perhaps the first time in the relationship, it's coming from their own autonomous choice, not as a response to someone else's need or demand. The key to making this work is that your absence must be completely authentic and genuine. You're not disappearing strategically to manipulate their emotions. You're investing in your own life because it genuinely matters to you, because you have purposes and passions that exist independently of this relationship. The avoidance unconscious, which is far more perceptive than their conscious mind, detect the difference between authentic self-focus and manipulative withdrawal. Depth psychology teaches us that much of human behavior follows collective patterns, shared scripts and roles that society, culture, family systems, and past experiences have taught us to perform almost automatically. For the avoidant individual, one of their core defensive strategies for maintaining emotional safety is predicting others' behavior to maintain a sense of control over the relational environment. If they can predict with reasonable certainty that you'll always be there, waiting, always pursue when they pull away, always forgive their distance and come back for more, they feel safe in their avoidance pattern. You've become part of a known script, a predictable role in their psychological drama. And when something is predictable, there's no tension, no mystery, no psychological charge or energy to create interest or change, to make an avoidant genuinely initiate contact and take the lead in the relationship. You must step completely outside the collective script they expect based on their past experiences. You must become psychologically unpredictable, not erratic, unstable, or dramatic, but genuinely sovereign in your responses, acting from your own center rather than reacting to their behavior patterns. This means responding in ways that don't fit their mental models of how people typically behave. When they pull away or become distant, you don't immediately chase them or demand explanations about what's wrong or what you did to cause their withdrawal. Instead, you might respond with genuine equanimity and respect. It sounds like you need some space right now. Take care of yourself. And then you actually give them that space, not as a strategic move designed to make them miss you, but as genuine respect for both their stated needs and your own dignity and self-worth. When they breadcrumb you with minimal effort, sending occasional late-night texts or sporadic attention that requires little emotional investment on their part, you don't accept those crumbs as if they were a feast, grateful for any attention at all. You have standards and boundaries that aren't communicated with anger or punishment, but are simply clear about what you value and what kind of connection you're interested in creating. When they finally do reach out after days or weeks of silence, you're not always immediately available, dropping everything to respond within seconds because you're so relieved they finally made contact. not because you're playing games or trying to punish them, but because you genuinely have a life that doesn't revolve around their inconsistent availability. You're at dinner with friends, focused on a work project, enjoying a hobby, living your actual life. This unpredictability, this refusal to follow the collective script they've come to expect triggers something powerful in the avoidance psyche. They can't easily follow you away in the safe but uninteresting category of people who will always be available, or the needy and controllable category of people whose behavior they can predict and manage. You become a genuine mystery, a puzzle their unconscious wants to solve, an anomaly in their relational experience that demands attention and psychological energy. And here's the deeper psychological truth that makes this so effective. Unpredictability signals aliveness, vitality, genuine personhood. It signals that you're a real, complex, multidimensional individual with your own needs, desires, and life trajectory, not a cardboard cutout playing a predetermined role in their psychological drama. The unconscious mind, as depth psychology has demonstrated, is always seeking what is alive, what is real, what challenges its comfortable defenses and invites growth. When you embody this unpredictable authenticity, when your responses come from your genuine self rather than from fear or strategy, the avoidance psyche becomes engaged in a way that their conscious defenses can't fully control or manage. Let's go to the deepest layer of psychological transformation, the place where real and lasting change becomes possible. In symbolic psychology, there's a concept called the conjunction, the sacred marriage, the union of opposites, the integration of seemingly incompatible elements into something transcendent that's greater than the sum of its parts. For the avoidant individual, their entire psychological structure, built over years or decades, is founded on a false dichotomy, a limiting either framework. I can have either independence or connection, either autonomy or intimacy, either maintain myself as a separate individual or enter into relationship. This either or thinking, this belief that these things are mutually exclusive, precisely what keeps them stuck in their avoidant pattern, unable to move toward the very connection their soul actually craves. The ultimate key to making an avoidant not just initiate contact, but genuinely take the lead in creating a real relationship is to embody, not just talk about intellectually, but actually embody in your lived experience the possibility of both, and rather than either. You demonstrate through your being, through the way you live your life daily, that autonomy and intimacy can coexist beautifully, that vulnerability and strength are not opposites, but complementary qualities. Two people can come together in genuine connection without either person losing themselves or sacrificing their individual identity. This embodiment can't be faked or performed as a technique. It must be real, emerging from your own psychological work and integration. You show them what it looks like to be deeply connected to your own life, your passions, your friends, your goals, your sense of purpose, while also being capable of genuine emotional intimacy when you choose to engage in it. You demonstrate that you can be vulnerable and share your feelings without becoming dependent on their response for your emotional stability. You model how someone can express needs and desires without making demands or creating obligation. You live the truth that emotional openness actually enhances your strength rather than diminishing it. That allowing someone to matter to you doesn't mean giving up your power or autonomy. This is the deepest psychological invitation you can possibly offer to an avoidant person. You're not asking them to give up who they are, not demanding They abandon the independence and self-reliance that feel essential to their survival. You're showing them through lived example that becoming more connected, more open, the more emotionally available actually makes them more whole, not less autonomous. You're presenting evidence that contradicts their core wound, their fundamental belief that intimacy means losing oneself. When an avoidant person encounters this possibility, when they see it lived authentically rather than just discussed theoretically, something shifts at a soul level, at the deepest layers of their psyche. The rigid defenses that have protected them for so long begin to feel less like essential protection and more like a prison that's limiting their growth and keeping them from experiencing the fullness of life. They begin to wonder, perhaps for the first time, what if I could have both? What if intimacy didn't mean losing myself? What if I could be close to someone and still be fully me? This is when genuine transformation happens, when the change goes deeper than behavioral modification into actual psychological growth. This is when they don't just initiate contact to get attention, they initiate genuine vulnerability and emotional risk taking. They start taking the lead in the relationship, not out of obligation or strategy, but because they've glimpsed something their wounded psychology told them was impossible, a form of connection that expands rather than diminishes their sense of self, that adds to their life rather than threatening to consume it.